The Tonkin Campaign was an armed conflict fought between June 1883 and April 1886 by the French against, variously, the Vietnamese, Liu Yongfu's Black Flag Army and the Chinese Guangxi and Yunnan armies to occupy Tonkin and entrench a French protectorate there. The campaign, complicated in August 1884 by the outbreak of the Sino-French War and in July 1885 by the Cien Vuong nationalist uprising in Annam, which required the diversion of large numbers of French troops, was conducted by the Tonkin Expeditionary Corps, supported by the gunboats of the Tonkin Flotilla. The campaign officially ended in April 1886, when the Expeditionary Corps was reduced in size to a division of occupation. But Tonkin was not effectively pacified until 1896. Hanoi and Nam Thin. 9 years after Francis Garnier's failed attempt to conquer Tonkin, French and Vietnamese troops clashed in Tonkin on 25 April 1882, when Commandant Henry Riviere seized the citadel of Hanoi with a small force of marine infantry. After a lull of several months, the arrival of reinforcements from France in February 1883 allowed Riviere to mount a campaign to capture the citadel of Nam Thin. The capture of Nam Thin was strategically necessary for the French to secure their communications with the sea. During Riviere's absence at Nam Thin with the bulk of his forces, Chef de Bataillon Berthier de Villers defeated a Vietnamese attack on the French positions at Hanoi by Prince Hoang Kvem at the Battle of Gia Cuc. Although these early actions deserved to be considered part of the Tonkin Campaign, the campaign is conventionally considered to have begun in June 1883, in the wake of the decision by the French government to dispatch reinforcements to Tonkin to avenge Riviere's defeat and death at the hands of Liu Yongfu's Black Flag Army at the Battle of Paper Bridge on 19 May 1883. These reinforcements were organized into a Tonkin Expeditionary Corps, which was placed under the command of General de Brigade Alexandre Eugene Bouet, the highest-ranking marine infantry officer available in the French colony of Cochin, China. The French position in Tonkin on Bouet's arrival in early June 1883 was extremely precarious. The French had only small garrisons in Hanoi, Haiphong and Nam Thin, isolated posts at Hon Gai and at Kien Hon in Annam, and little immediate prospect of taking the offensive against Liu Yongfu's Black Flags and Prince Hoang Kvem's Vietnamese. Bouet's first step was to withdraw the isolated French garrisons of Kien Hon and Hon Gai. He had also been authorized to abandon Nam Thin at need, but he decided to try to defend all three major French posts. During June, the French dug in behind their defenses and beat off half-hearted Vietnamese demonstrations against Hanoi and Nam Thin. The early arrival of reinforcements from France and New Caledonia and the recruitment of Cochin Chinese and Tonkinese auxiliary formations allowed Bouet to hit back at his tormentors. On 19 July, Chef de Bataillon Pierre de Badens, the French commandant superior at Nam Thin, attacked and defeated Prince Hoang Kvem's besieging Vietnamese army, effectively relieving Vietnamese pressure on Nam Thin. Establishment of the French protectorate. The arrival of Admiral Ame Acute d'Acute Courbet in Along Bay in July 1883 with substantial naval reinforcements further strengthened the French position in Tonkin. Although the French were now in a position to consider taking the offensive against Liu Yongfu, they realized that military action against the Black Flag Army had to be accompanied by a political settlement with the Vietnamese court at Hue, if necessary by coercion, that recognized a French protectorate in Tonkin. On 30 July 1883, Admiral Courbet, General Bouet and François-Jules Harmond, the recently appointed French Civil Commissioner General for Tonkin, held a council of war at Haiphong. The three men agreed that Bouet should launch an offensive against the Black Flag Army in its positions around Phu Hoi on the Day River as soon as possible. They also noted that the court of Hu was covertly aiding and abetting Liu Yongfu's Black Flag Army, and that Prince Hoang was still in arms against the French at Nam Thin. They therefore decided, largely on Harmon's urging, to recommend to the French government a strike against the Vietnamese defences of Hu, followed by an ultimatum requiring the Vietnamese to accept a French protectorate over Tonkin or face immediate attack. The proposal was approved by the Navy Ministry on the 11th of August, and on the 18th of August several warships of Courbet's Tonkin Coast Naval Division bombarded the Tuanan forts at the entrance to the Hu River. On the 20th of August, in the Battle of Tuanan, 2 companies of French marine infantry and the landing companies of 3 French warships went ashore and stormed the forts under heavy fire. During the afternoon, the gunboats Lynx and Viper forced a barrage at the entrance to the River of Perfumes, enabling the French to attack Hu directly if they chose. The Vietnamese asked for an armistice, and on the 25th of August Harmon dictated the Treaty of Hu to the cowed Vietnamese court. The Vietnamese recognized the legitimacy of the French occupation of Cochin China, accepted a French protectorate both for Annam and Tonkin, and promised to withdraw their troops from Tonkin, Vietnam. Its royal house and its court survived, but under French direction. France was granted the privilege of stationing a resident general at Hu, who would work to the civil commissioner general in Tonkin and could require a personal audience with the Vietnamese emperor. To ensure there were no second thoughts, a permanent French garrison would occupy the Tuanan forts. Large swathes of territory were also transferred from Annam to Tonkin and the French colony of Cochin China. The French cancelled the country's debts but required in return the cession of the southern province of Binh Thuan, which was annexed to Cochin China. At the same time, the northern provinces of Nghi, Than Hoa and Ha Tin were transferred to Tonkin, where they would come under direct French oversight. In return, the French undertook to drive out the Black Flags from Tonkin and to guarantee freedom of commerce on the Red River, Phu Hoai, Palin and Haiduang. Meanwhile, as agreed at the Haiphong Conference, General Buet Juli took the offensive against Liu Yongfu's Black Flag Army. Buet twice attacked the Black Flags in their defences along the Day River, in the Battle of Phu Hoai and the Battle of Palin. These offensives met with only limited success, and in the eyes of the world were tantamount to French defeats. More encouragingly for the French, a column of marine infantry and Cochin Chinese riflemen under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Brianville stormed the Vietnamese defences of Haiduang. On the 13th of August, the capture of Haiduang was notable for atrocities committed by both the French and the Vietnamese. The French discovered, hung up by hooks from the city walls, the mutilated bodies of several missing French and Vietnamese soldiers of the Expeditionary Corps. The dead soldiers had clearly been tortured to death, and the French took their revenge by bayoneting the Vietnamese wounded. The capture of Haiduang secured the French line of communication by river between Hanoi and Haiphong. The French occupied the citadel of Haiduang and also established a post a few kilometers to the north of the town, at Elephant Mountain. In November 1883, the French further strengthened their grip on the delta by occupying the towns of Ninh Binh, Hun Yen and Quang Yen. The allegiance of Ninh Binh was of particular importance to the French, as artillery mounted in its lofty citadel controlled river traffic to the Gulf of Tonkin. Although the Vietnamese governor of Ninh Binh had made no attempt to hinder the passage of the expedition launched by Henri Rivière in March 1883 to capture Nam Thin, he was known to be hostile towards the French. Accordingly, Lieutenant Colonel Pierre de Bardens was sent to occupy Ninh Binh with a company of marine infantry, supported by the gunboats Leopard and Pluvier. Cowed by the silent menace of the gunboats, the Vietnamese handed over the citadel of Ninh Binh without resistance, and the French installed a garrison there. The Treaty of Hue remained a dead letter in Tonkin. Vietnamese mandarins sent to Tonkin to support French administration there were sullen and uncooperative, and Prince Hoang declined to withdraw Vietnamese forces from Tonkin. Meanwhile, the Black Flags, with Prince Hoang's active encouragement, stepped up their attacks on French posts during the autumn of 1883. The small French garrisons in Palin and Batang were harassed, and on the 17th of November the French post at Hai Duong was attacked and nearly overwhelmed by a force of 2,000 Vietnamese insurgents. Only the timely arrival of the gunboat Lynx enabled the defenders to hold their positions. Sun Tay. In December 1883 the French took their revenge. Admiral Ame Acute Corbett, who had replaced Bouet in command of the Tonkin Expeditionary Corps 2 months earlier, assembled a column of 9,000 men and marched on Sun Tay for a showdown with Liu Yongfu's Black Flag Army. The decision was of considerable political significance, as an attack on Sun Tay would bring the French into direct conflict with Chinese troops for the first time in the campaign. China, the traditional overlord of Vietnam, had for months been covertly supporting the Black Flags, and had stationed Chinese troops in Sun Tay, Lang Son, Bac Ninh and other Tonkinese towns to limit French freedom of movement. The French government appreciated that an attack on Sun Tay would probably result in an undeclared war with China, but calculated that a quick victory in Tonkin would force the Chinese to accept a fait accompli. On 10 December 1883, after the failure of diplomatic efforts to persuade the Chinese to withdraw their troops, the French government authorized Corbett to attack Sun Tay. The Sun Tay campaign was the fiercest campaign the French had yet fought in Tonkin. Although the Chinese and Vietnamese contingents at Sun Tay played little part in the defense, Liu Yongfu's Black Flags fought ferociously to hold the city. On 14 December the French assaulted the outer defences of Sun Tay at Phu Sa, but were thrown back with heavy casualties. Hoping to exploit Corbett's defeat, Liu Yongfu attacked the French lines the same night, but the Black Flag attack also failed disastrously. After resting his troops on 15 December, Corbett again assaulted the defences of Sun Tay on the afternoon of 16 December. This time the attack was thoroughly prepared by artillery, and delivered only after the defenders had been worn down. At 5 p.m., a Foreign Legion battalion and a battalion of Marines captured the western gate of Sun Tay and fought their way into the town. Liu Yongfu's garrison withdrew to the citadel, and evacuated Sun Tay under cover of darkness several hours later. Corbett had achieved his objective, but at considerable cost. French casualties at Sun Tay were 83 dead and 320 wounded. The fighting at Sun Tay also took a terrible toll of the Black Flags, and in the opinion of some observers broke them once and for all as a serious fighting force. Bac Ninh and Hung Hoa. On 16 December 1883, the very day on which he captured Sun Tay, Admiral Corbett was replaced in command of the Tonkin Expeditionary Corps by General de Division Charles Theodore Millet. As a result of the dispatch of strong reinforcements to Tonkin in November 1883 and the consequent expansion of the Expeditionary Corps into a 2-brigade army division. Although the capture of Sun Tay paved the way for the eventual French conquest of Tonkin, the French now had to deal with opposition from China as well as the Black Flag Army. Having exhausted diplomatic efforts to persuade the Chinese to withdraw their armies from Tonkin, the French government sanctioned an attack by Millet on the fortress of Bac Ninh, occupied since the autumn of 1882 by China's Guangxi army. In March 1884, in the Bac Ninh campaign, Millet routed the Guangxi army and captured Bac Ninh. Millet put just over 11,000 French, Algerian and Vietnamese soldiers into the field at Bac Ninh, the largest concentration of French troops ever assembled in the Tonkin Campaign. Millet followed up his victory by mopping up scattered Chinese garrisons left behind by the Guangxi army after the rout at Bac Ninh and by mounting a major campaign against Liu Yongfu's Black Flag Army, which had retreated to Hung Hoa. On the 11th of April 1884, Millet captured Hung Hoa and Dong Nhan, flanking the Black Flag Army and its Vietnamese allies out of a formidable defensive position without losing a man. The Black Flag Army retreated westwards up the Red River to Thanh Quan, while Prince Hoang Kevm's Vietnamese forces fell back southwards from Dong Nhan towards the Annam-Tonkin border, making for the sanctuary of the province of Thanh Hoa, where the French had not yet installed any garrisons. Millet dispatched Lieutenant Colonel Letelier with 2 Turco battalions and supporting cavalry to harry Liu Yongfu's retreat, and sent General Briere de Lisle with the rest of the 1st Brigade in pursuit of Prince Hoang. In early May, Briere de Lisle cornered Prince Hoang in Phugo, several kilometers to the northwest of Ninh Binh, but the French government forbade him to attack the Vietnamese defenses, having just received news that China was ready to treat with France over the future of Tonkin. Elsewhere, though, the French kept up the pressure. On the 11th of May, Chef de Bataillon Ray Gasser attacked the Chinese garrison of Tai Nguyen and drove it out. In the same week, the landing companies of Admiral Courbet's Tonkin Coast Naval Division exterminated nests of Vietnamese pirates along the coast of the Gulf of Tonkin around Dam Ha and Ha Coi. On the 11th of May 1884, the same day as French and Chinese forces clashed at Tai Nguyen, France and China concluded the Shanxi Accord. This treaty provided for the immediate evacuation of Tonkin by the Chinese armies, and the implicit recognition by China of the French protectorate over Tonkin. The conclusion of the Shanxi Accord allowed the French to consolidate their hold on the delta in May and June 1884. By the end of June, the French had established forward bases at Hung Hoa, Tu Yen Quang, Phu Lang Tong, and Tai Nguyen. These posts, together with the bases established further to the east at Hai Duong and Quang Yen the previous autumn, formed a cordon that enclosed most of the delta. Behind this chain of frontline posts, the French were strongly entrenched in Son Tay, Hanoi, Nam Thin, Ninh Binh, Bac Ninh and Sept Pagodes. It only remained for them to occupy Lang Son and the other fortresses of northern Tonkin once they were evacuated by the Chinese under the terms of the Shanxi Accord. In theory, the Shanxi Accord should have resolved the confrontation between France and China in Tonkin, but a clash between French and Chinese troops at Bac Ninh on 23 June 1884 plunged both countries into a fresh crisis. China's refusal to pay an indemnity for the Bac Ninh ambush led 2 months later to the outbreak of the Sino-French War.